So the murder mystery I have on the screen, the murder mystery, which of course connects to Porphyry the detective. Here's Joseph Frank's great summary. So Crime and Punishment is focused on the solution of an enigma that is the mystery of Raskolnikov's motivation. So we know who did it, we know what happened, but why did he do it? So Raskolnikov, it turns out, discovers that he does not understand why he killed, or rather, as our novel unfolds, he's going to discover more and more and more about what he did and why he did it. Now, the point of the novel and the novelist with this is to show you, with the unfolding investigation, that we don't always know what we're doing. So you see, that's a huge thing for us to think about, to realize that we do things and sometimes we don't know all about what we're doing, which then makes it even more dangerous to do things like he did. So that's part of it. But he's going to discover, it's self-discovery. Dostoevsky internalizes, psychologizes the usual quest for the murderer in the detective story plot, but he moves this over to Raskolnikov searching for his own motivation. Now, in the beginning, you hear the motivation, so he just, well, we kind of know what it is. The dirty old lady is terrible and doesn't deserve to live, and he's such a better person, he deserves to end her living. So that's kind of the beginning of it, but we know that's not all of it. And his sickness tells us that he's been made ill by what he did, so therefore, clearly his conscience is not at ease with what he did. So that's how he alerts us to what's happening inside. Who is Raskolnikov? Well, let's start out with this, just the basics. He's isolated. He's away from his school. He's away from his college. He's away from his friends. He's almost cut off from everybody except his one friend, Razumikin, who comes to the studio apartment, tiny little closet apartment, and comes and sees him and opens the door and comes in, even though Raskolnikov's telling him to go away. So that's the first thing. He's isolated. Number two, we know he has a powerful, deep conscience about the world. He's suffering horribly over the Marmeladov story, over Sonia, over everything about their story, and that he has a very powerful, deep compassion for others. He's drawn into their story more than most of us would be. He's going to spend a lot of time with them. He's going to try to help. Number four, he's full of ideas, and this is the key thing. This is what Turgenev sees in Fathers and Sons, and now this is what Dostoevsky is going to show us in this book. He's going to show it again in The Demons, The Possessed, and he's going to show it again in The Brothers Karamazov. And this is what Dostoevsky is getting a hold of, that in the 19th century, in his time, he's living in a time where dangerous ideas are flying around unattached, and anybody can get infected by them. They could just pop up like an infection, and you all of a sudden you've got this, and then you're in danger. So that's his theme: the power of ideas, the danger of ideas, the ease with which individuals pick up ideas. Okay, so isolation, conscience, compassion, and philosophical infection. He's isolated because of this alienation from all the normal people. Now, this is a big, big theme in the 19th century. It's essentially Rousseau Romanticism continuing on into the 19th century. Rousseau, all of Rousseau, 1750, you all know about him, and that's the sort of the kernel of the Rousseau importance of the individual. I'm special, and I'm better than everybody else, and so I'm alienated from all these other normal, stupid people. So there's an arrogance in him. We all know it, we all see it, we all recognize it. And as Dane was saying during the break, and this arrogance, once he gets into the hands of the detective, this arrogance gets a hold of him, and he can't shut up. Again and again, he's in a conversation with a detective investigating a murder he committed, and he can't shut up. The detective knows exactly what buttons to push. his arrogance buttons, and boom, out he floods a whole lot of stuff. And like Dane said, he's shouting at him, shut up! 3, he nominates for himself this active role. He is going to do something. He needs to take action in the world. He needs to help salvation. He needs to bring salvation. So there's a kind of almost messianic role that he's going to give to himself. He needs to take action in a bad world. So all of what he's doing, on the face of it, is part of a philosophical search for truth and goodness. So his compassion, sparked by this very, very acute sense of morality and justice in his conscience, brings forth this great compassion, which then brings forth his action. So notice, and when you read it, I don't have to tell this to you, but when you read it, notice at the center of the novel is all this ethical, philosophical meandering inside of his mind. This is what the book is about. If you go back and pick up Jane Austen, that's not what Jane Austen is about. None of the characters are meandering inside like that. They're outside meandering about who has the bigger plot, who has the bigger farm, who has the smaller farm, who has the better clothes, who doesn't. So, number 5, into the middle of this personal story come ideas. Nihilism, just like in Fathers and Sons. Nihilism, we have this character, Bazarov, and he's all full of these ideas, these very radical, very extreme ideas about you have to wipe everything else away before you can fix Russia. Untethered, dangerous, they touch everybody, they change everything. Ideas, dangerous ideas. Number 6, the action that he takes is very carefully thought out. He's been thinking about this for months. And his article is an article on crime. And the article, of course, if you suspect he committed this crime and you go get a copy of it, it's going to give you a lot of ammunition. If you are the investigating detective and you've read the article, which Porphyry has, in the article is the theme, his idea of the Superman. The article argues that certain extraordinary people are above the masses of humanity and so have the right to violate moral codes, for instance, by committing murder. Petrovich takes great interest in this article, not because he agrees with it, because he sees it as a piece of evidence pointing to Raskolnikov's guilt. The discussion takes place, intellectual plane. Porphyry's read it, he has it, he knows about it, he's going to introduce it to Raskolnikov, and Raskolnikov is going to bite. He's going to be happy to discuss this, which is a very, very bad idea. But it shows the gap between talking about this or writing an article about it and doing it. Now, of course, in the book, it is impossible for Raskolnikov to live like this. So that's the outcome of the book. But the other person who writes all this for us, the Superman, writes a whole book about it, Superman, goes insane. In those last years, when he's writing Man and Superman, he's falling apart. He's killing himself with his ideas. He just breaks down. And he actually does break down in Turin, out in the street, over a horse driver beating his horse. That's the incident when Nietzsche loses his control in the street and just goes insane. Yeah, how about that? Yeah, how about that? I know. It sends chills down your spine to think that in the 1890s in Turin, the exact incident is the one that trips Nietzsche up. His sister has to come to Turin and get him and take him home to Germany. That's it. He's out after that. He never comes back. Now, why? Why would you propose all of this? Well, the act is a kind of rebellion. That's the core of this. It's not just to certainly take her money. No. He's not just going to rob her. No. This is to raise yourself up above ordinary people and act in a ideological and moral rebellion in which you say, I reject the way things are. I reject this world. I reject this world we live in. If it's God's world, then I reject God's world. If it's the Tsar's house, then I reject the Tsar. Doesn't matter. In any case, whatever it is, I reject it. Raskolnikov is a rebel. And that means he's in the great romantic tradition of the rebels that goes all the way back to Rousseau in 1750 and the French Revolution and all the rebels in the French Revolution. And he's going to mention them and he's going to refer to some of them by name. But also then into a 19th century where it's way more than that. And he says, Raskolnikov, to God, if this is God's world, I reject your world and I reject the suffering that you allow in your world. I reject your justice and your morality because it allows suffering in this world that I cannot bear. I cannot bear the horrible dream I have about mistreating the horse. And the suffering of one innocent child makes your justice unacceptable. And of course, that's always the key thing in a Dostoevsky novel. There's always the suffering child. That's where you get finally. And we can't allow the suffering child. 8, Raskolnikov's rebellion is in the name of the great romantic universal rebellion demanding freedom from God's unjust world. And we could list 100 names in this right this minute. We could all come up with just one after another. They're all saying the same thing. I reject your world. I reject the suffering of the world. Suffering of the world is not acceptable. Suffering of one child is not acceptable. Therefore, I reject your world, God. I reject your world. So Raskolnikov is a rebel in high tradition. He does this because he's that special young man, and he does not see the moral justice in God's universe. So this human being uses his own intellect, his reading, his ideas, to count the divine order as wanting. It's not good enough for me, he says. Not good enough for me. And all his ideas we know about, and we know where they came from, and we know how he got them. In his act of rebellion, Raskolnikov allows his actions to be driven by all these ideas and all these books. And in the process, of course, he loses his own instinctive, caring, compassionate self, which is there and which we see, again and again and again. It's all there. But his ideas overwhelm him. So this is Basarov in Fathers and Sons. So the greatness of the novel is that it's putting in front of us the highest possible kind of rebellion. It's a metaphysical rebellion. It's a philosophical rebellion. It's a rebellion against the highest level of our universe as unacceptable to us. Now, this is exactly the same thing that Kierkegaard will write about again and again and again, which will become part of existentialism and lead right into the 20th century. It's the same thing Nietzsche is going to write about, and as I said, he's going to end up creating the Superman and being driven insane by it. It's unbearable, is the locus of his arrival. And it's exactly what Camus tells us about in his brilliant book, The Rebel. And if you've never read it, I urge you all, go get a copy of The Rebel, because based on all of what we're talking about here tonight, you will just sail right through it. You'll know exactly what it's about. The world here is a world of exaltation of the brilliant and the high and the mighty, the top. This is elite. This is elitism. That's what he's describing, and that's what he sees himself as part of. Even though he's surrounded by the poor people and has great compassion for them. Great compassion. Marmeladovs. Yeah, it's a... Yeah, absolutely. An inherent contradiction, absolutely.